You're listening to the Giant Shoulders Podcast, a show all about gratitude and legacy. I'm your host, Ryan Augustine. Let's get into today's episode. All right, welcome back to another episode of the Giant Shoulders Podcast. I am really excited for today's episode, everybody. We have an amazing guest on the show today, Kyle Steele. Kyle, welcome to the show.
Thank you, man. Appreciate you having me. Glad we could connect here. Two good Midwesterners just chatting about life, man. It's good.
Absolutely, man. This is great. So a little brief intro about Kyle, and then I'll actually let him introduce himself. So he is the most interesting man in leasing, which I'm not actually quite sure what that means. So we'll get into that a little bit. And then the host of the show, 1 Minute Wednesday, which if you're on LinkedIn, you got to check it out. # 1 Minute Wednesday. Really great videos, applicable regardless of the space you're in. So that's been cool following you and getting a little bit of insight into that. So I guess give us kind of an overview, give us a little bit about who Kyle is, and then we can kind of jump in and got some good questions for you today. So
absolutely. Well, I've spent a total of about 15 years in the leasing industry, right? Non-consecutive, 13 and then 2, or however you add up the math, right? You're the finance guy, not me. But the reason I proclaim myself as the most interesting man in leasing isn't because I'm that interesting. It's because the leasing industry is absolutely boring, right? You're in the financial industry.
I love it.
You get it. Like, there's just a lot of boring people who are like afraid to have personality. It's like you can't make a joke, right? You can't have fun. You can't make fun of yourself. You can't do anything. So that's more so why I fake trademarked it on LinkedIn, right? It says TM, but it's not really trademarked or anything. It's a play on the Dos Equis guy, but the leasing industry in general, financial industry is a whole in its entirety is just boring. Right? It's full of just empty suits who I'm interested in you and your family's success, right? It's like, oh my God, could you think of a more boring line, right? And so if you're looking through LinkedIn and you see a connection request from, senior account manager, helping you provide financial solutions, or most interesting man in leasing, you're probably like, I'm going to at least give this dude a shot and take his call. Right, just to kind of see what he's about. So that's how I kind of trademarked the line unofficially. Right, I didn't pay any money. I just did it. For for the most interesting man in leasing. But myself, when I look at kind of the path of my career, I would say everything that I've done or accomplished is because I've done it. Right, I don't have a 4-year degree. I do not have a 4-year degree. I went to college too young. I was more interested in the extracurricular activities that college brings rather than studying. So if I would have had the opportunity, I kind of look at the landscape now for kids who are graduating high school. You have a lot longer runway in order to go to school. You don't have to decide at 18, do I want to go on my parents' benefits, go to school, or get a job and get my own benefits? That's a really tough decision point at 18. And, we can't all be Ryan Augustine, who's super mature and has his stuff together at 18, right?
Oh yeah, you didn't know me at 18, brother.
Yeah, exactly. And none of us do. And I think that, we force that decision point way too young, like asking kids, what do you want to be at 18? Hell, I don't know what I want to be at 42. You don't know what you want to be at, you're probably, in your 20s, right? And so, for me, it's been largely about learning and, hands-on learning. And, I worked for a company, MCI, back in the day, back when we had phones that were on the wall and you would pick them up and like dial. And you could use like star 69. You probably use that back in the day. So the ladies didn't like trace who was coming at you, Ryan, which is cool, right? And then star 67 and all that other stuff. But anyway, so I worked for MCI. That's where I met my beautiful wife, Lisa Marie. I met there. We have 2 beautiful boys, 23 and 18. And yes, people are like, you don't look old enough to have sons that age, and I'm definitely not mature enough to have sons that age by any means. So with with that, MCI, went on to a place in, great America, where I learned the leasing industry and kind of the leasing and finance. And that's where I met a lot of the mentors, and they're no longer with the company, right? And we'll kind of get into that. But that's where I met a lot of very influential people who helped shape my career with their path as well. And so currently I'm the director of digital marketing with Amore Equipment Finance. They had recruited me about a year ago, to come back in. I started my own digital marketing company in 2017, had a lot of success with that. And that's where I came across the power of LinkedIn, the power of video. I have my marketing company. I had zero funds for marketing myself, and I thought, there's a lot behind this LinkedIn video. I need to start doing something. And I had never done video before. I had no social media presence before 2016 whatsoever. And I look at how that's evolved into today, where a lot of people call for advice. What should we do here? And it's all been by just jumping in and diving in. You can read articles, you can digest a lot of information, listen to podcasts, whatever, but just diving in and doing it. Like, I've got a lot of scars, right? But those scars tell stories on how to and how to not do things. And that's basically been my whole entire life, right? I mean, as a parent, you can read all the books you want on parenting, but once those kids come home, you're in, oh crap mode. What do I actually do, right? And now, you think growing up, like parents have it figured out, like they know what they're doing. Then you grow up and you figure out that we're just all the same morons at a PTA meeting trying to figure out what we're supposed to do, right? Like, that's it. And so, I look at that, and that's how life has been for me, right? Like, I didn't, I just jump in and you dive in, you figure it out, you get dirty, you come back out the other side, you learn, and you keep moving on. So I don't know if that's a traditional introduction, but that's how Kyle Steele got here today, I guess, man.
I love it, man. I love it. And that actually, so real quick, I want to give a shout out to the guy who introduced us, which is Seth Thompson.
Baby Seth Thompson. That's right.
And he said not too long ago on a different podcast, default to action. Like, if that was the one piece of advice he could give somebody. And I think that's a perfect segue to just tell him thank you, but then also to tie that up, because I think so often, so many people, you want what you're doing to be perfect, right? You want it to be right. You see other people having success, and it's like, okay, these are the number of different things that I see that they're doing. I want to emulate that. And it's like, well, before you try to get it perfect, why don't you just try to do it? And I think that's underdone today. No pun intended. And people try to make it perfect before they actually just try to do it. And so I think that's phenomenal. So that's great advice for probably just about 95% of people listening to this. So
yeah, and you think about, if you think about creating a video, you're thinking, oh, it's going to go viral and there's millions of people that are going to watch it. You're probably going to get like 400 or 500 views. And I have a mental Rolodex of 150 1 Minute Wednesdays, but something that sticks in my mind whenever I'm doing videos or whatever, because when I first started doing them, I really had those thoughts. What are people going to think? How are they going to react? Are they going to hate me? Right? All those things. And those who mind don't matter, and those who matter just don't mind, right? Your true friends, like the real people who support you, they're going to be there. And Seth's very interesting, because we always joke, like I call my first video the nose hair video, right? Like I was, it was in the Bob Ross shirt, right? I had the Bob Ross. My first 1 Minute Wednesday was about Bob Ross and how, tell me if you knew this about Bob Ross. He spent 20 years as a drill sergeant in the Air Force. Would you have ever thought that?
I actually think I might have seen your video on that.
Okay.
So I think that's the only reason why I know that.
Yes. And so he spent 20 years yelling at people, but he had a passion for art. And he said, when I retire, I'm just going to paint. And then he started the joy of painting with Bob Ross, right? You would have never thought. You would have thought like he was like, growing weed on a weed farm in Oregon, like, on a hippie commune or something, not in the Air Force.
Right.
And so I call it the nose hair video, right? Because my first video, it's like I had the camera down here. You can see my nose hair. It's like, it's terrible. Took me like 80 shots. I call Seth's first video, right? Seth's very polished and amazing today, right?
Yeah.
But I call his first video the crotch shot video because it was like at crotch level, right? But the thing is, we started somewhere, right? We started somewhere,
Yeah.
and it's easy to look at where we're at today and say, this, all these guys just know what they're doing. No, our first videos were terrible. They were terrible in comparison to where we're at now. But in order to improve, you got to start somewhere. And what I love about Seth, and this is something, for your generation, Ryan, that I think maybe sometimes your generation doesn't get the respect that it deserves in this sense. That for the first time in history, the older generation, my generation, Gen X and above boomers and everybody, we have just as much, if not more, to learn from your generation as you do from our generation, right? Because you think about 1955, you show up at the Ford plant, Bob, who's been there 30 years, knows what he's doing. You're learning 99% of things from him. Now, with social media, with phones, with anything, right, with technology, we're learning more from you than you are from us in terms of how to approach our audiences, especially in the sales world as well. There's so many digital tools that you've grown up with, or at least harness the power and have more comfort, right? You said, hey, I'm going to start a podcast. I know how to do it. Zoom, boom, done, right? Like, it was really easy for you. For somebody in their 40s, they're going to overthink that because they're saying, well, I haven't done that before. I don't know how to do that, right? I mean, but you've got to evolve. And Seth, when he came in, yeah, he came into kind of a rowdy bunch, right? We were kind of like the 2004 Red Sox, 2003 Red Sox, where it's kind of a rowdy bunch. But he came in, we taught him, sales, how to approach things, in on the flip side, he taught me a lot about how to approach things from a digital perspective, just different mindsets, a lot of things. So if we all take that approach that we can learn from everybody, as opposed to, I've been here 10 years, you need to learn from me. Yeah. I think egos get in the way of education far too often in the business world. And you've probably been on the receiving end of that, where you think, hey, I have a good way to approach this, but because of your age, because of your lack of tenure, you don't get that respect. And with Seth, he came in and I thought, hey, this is a sharp kid, great work ethic. I have just as much to learn from him as he does from me. So, shout out to your guys' generation. You guys are go-getters, and you do it and you take action, far more than any other generation in history, man. So big props to Seth and to you, man.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's like, I couldn't have set up a better segue into the first line of questioning. So thank you for that, Kyle. But I guess, so that's a perfect thing. And I think a really great premise of this show, because, and why I was in part so excited to have you on, because I feel like different people feel more gratitude for where they've been and where they've come based on who's helped them get there in a small way or a big way. And a lot of people are just a little bit more in tune to that as opposed to some other people. And so I feel like, to this conversation, like, you were clearly more in tune to that, because a lot of people would be like, oh, who's this punk coming in? Like, yeah, we'll try to shape them up and everything, but your attitude of like, hey, let's learn from each other, I think is rare, so to speak, and I think that's super valuable, because how often do we miss out on those opportunities to learn from people when we've got kind of that pride that gets in the way? And I feel like that's a great skill. So
yeah,
leading into the, like, who are some other people then that you feel like are some of those people who've taught you some really valuable pieces of business life information, the shoulders of the giants that you're standing on, Kyle?
Yeah. So for me, it's family first, right? I mean, there's always family first, and my dad, my brother, my grandpa Akers. I told you the story about why I'm a Bears fan, right? And why no Packers fan can shoot holes in it, because I'm a Bears fan because my grandpa was a gunner on the USS Maryland in World War II, met George Halas, and he's been a Bears fan ever since, right? Like even a Packers fan who knows the misery that the Bears have had can't shoot any holes in that one. It's like, yep, I get it. You're not a bandwagoner. You've been with it since the early days of the NFL, but definitely my grandpa on just how, the work ethic that he, that generation, they call that the silent generation, right? And there's so much to learn from that generation in the sense of they didn't care what you did for a living. It didn't matter if you worked at a factory, if you were a janitor, if you were, the CEO of Coca-Cola. If you provided for your family, and provided a good environment for your family, a house, food on the table, they respected you. It didn't matter what you did, right? And so there's all these things about treat the janitor like the CEO. Duh, that's common sense, right? And I think like you and I coming from the Midwest, we don't have to be told those things because we saw our grandparents, right, get the door for the lady walking in the gas station. We saw our grandparents, how they treated the waiter or waitress when we went out, right? Like I almost get emotional thinking of just the compassion and genuine just caring that generation had for their fellow human beings. And I think that we've largely gotten away from that, where we get caught up in what you do for a living. It doesn't matter what you do for a living. You're providing for your family in an honest way. That is something to be proud of, right? And so when I think about my grandpa, that's what I really think about. When I think about my dad and my mom, they're both teachers. My brother's a professor out at Utah, really great educators, and always leaving somebody feeling better than you found them, right? And my dad as a coach always did that with a player, just in my mom, the generosity, right? She's always so generous and caring, where if somebody does something for her, if you're not on her shit list, right? She has, such compassion and caring. She wants to, bring you, like her list of people that on her Christmas list is very, very long, right? Bringing Chex Mix, getting chocolates. I think about our boys, right? Brendan and Caleb and all their friends. All their friends are part of that, grandkid mentality with them. So the generosity's there. Now, from a professional perspective, there's two people that come to mind every single day in what I do. The first one is Jerry Lewis, right? And he was my leader at Great America when I first started in account support. And that's a largely customer service role. And I always say everybody's in customer service, everybody's in sales, right? If you don't have that mentality, you should be fired or you're working for a terrible organization. Yeah. Either one, right? That's kind of the two paths it leads to. But he taught me so much about compassion, about how to phrase things, about being grateful, about how to show appreciation. He just taught me like when I think of the true core values of customer service and customer experience, Jerry Lewis is, far and beyond. Now, here's the confusing thing when you're at a company is that a company mentality or is that the mentality of the leader, right? And for me, largely it was the mentality of the leader, right? Because when you lose a leader from the organization, in that your principles, mission, core values start to drop a little bit, that tells you that that's not a culture thing, that was a leader thing, right? And so in the absence of that leader, is the culture the same? The answer to me was no. Jerry Lewis was phenomenal at creating a culture. And if you think about, there's a lot of people who look down on the customer service position in general, right? Yeah. He made that a very prideful in a destination to be at within Great America for me. He made that a place to really, that you can grow, you can level up, you can find satisfaction. It can be a career path, or you can, go to another position. But that if you wanted to do that, if you wanted to just create great customer service and great memories, right? He was very big on creating lasting memories. He was phenomenal at that. You could do that within his account support function, and just showing appreciation, how to coach people up. I remember the number one line that I think of, and I use this so often to this day. And as a married man, Ryan, you should definitely write this one down. But
I'm about to.
Yes, that's right. Instead of saying, we screw up or the organization screws up or whatever. And he always said, I'm sorry that we've disappointed you. Right. So, and that takes away everything else. Like people are like, man, they've acknowledged, right? Because acknowledgement's huge. They've acknowledged that they've disappointed me and that they've failed. Right now, as a married man, we do that weekly, if not daily. Right.
Oh, yeah.
So I'm sorry I've disappointed you. Right. And then, just that acknowledgement, he's taught me that. And I use that line to this day. The other person, Seth's a big influence, in my life. And we talk, at least monthly, if not, weekly sometimes, depending, if I want to, run something by him, he wants to run something by me. The other one that I talk to almost daily, definitely weekly, is Chad Greenlee. And that would be another great guy for you to have on your little show here.
Yeah.
With so many times in life, you seek out friends or best friends who are like you. Chad is nothing like me. He's detail oriented. He's professional. He's polished. He's kind of that, a little bit of a hard ass too, right? He tells me what I need to hear, not what I want to hear. And I think that as friends, we do that too often. We tell our friends what they want to hear. Like if there's something going on at work where, oh, that sucks. That sucks that they're doing that to you. Right? Instead of being like, have you tried this? Like, man up, show up, and address it. Instead of just chirping at me about it, like address it and get after it. He's my accountability partner in life, right? Like my wife definitely is, for many facets. From a professional and personal perspective, he is very much holding me accountable, and he learns just as much from me as I do from him, because I'm just let's go out and get after it, right? He also feels like maybe he strives for perfection instead of completion.
Sure.
And so we kind of have that yin and yang, that tit for tat kind of going on in our relationship, which you need. There's friends that you need. You call, I need support. I need somebody to coach me up and make me feel good. But then there's also, hey, here's what I'm going through. Tell me what I need to hear, right? Don't sugarcoat it. Just go after it. And that's definitely him. So that's kind of my short list, if it was even kind of a short list. But there's family first, right? I mean, that's kind of universal, but that's who you emulate in life. And as parents, especially, Ryan, I'll say this, that you always think it's a coaching moment. It's a teaching moment.
Yeah.
My sons learned way more about how to live life by how I treated somebody, how I got the door for somebody, how when they were, 12 and 13 years old and my youngest was 8, they went out to a diner down the street, ate, and they forgot to tip. Well, I made them walk all the way back and tip the waitress and apologize. And, they say, well, Caleb didn't tip. I'm like, he's 8 years old. He doesn't even know what tipping is. He barely knows what money is. Like, get your ass back there and tip the waitress, right? Because, and I've told both my boys, I said, and this is an Al McGuire line from your backyard, coached at Marquette University.
Absolutely.
He told his players, if you want, he said, after you graduate, work 6 months as a cab driver and 6 months as a bartender. You got your master's and PhD in life right there. And man, I'll tell you, I subscribe to that because I've been a bartender. And I still, when I ran my own company, I needed social interaction. So I called my friend who owned a bar and I branded myself as the worst bartender in Iowa. And I bartended, right? And so, hey, talk about setting expectations. You set them low and it's like, hey, you didn't screw up my drink. Okay, I'm going to tip the guy. But those are life skills. If you want to learn anything in sales, go work as a bartender. If I could tell any kid, and I say that loosely, if you're offended, I'm sorry. But like when you graduate, when you're 22, 23, go work as a bartender while you're working, at Northwestern Mutual, right? And because one is great client lead generation, because you're not trying to sell them anything. They're asking you for a beer or, a martini or whatever. So that's a slam dunk. But that's how you learn everything that you need to know in sales, right? Acknowledgement, empathy, like shutting up and listening. All those skills come from bartending. And, I read that line about Al McGuire when I was 18 or 19, didn't really get it. Now that I'm 42, it resonates, right? And I saw your face when I said it. It's like, yeah, that's slam dunk.
I love it. I love it, man. Man, that's so good. So a couple things that I want to touch on, then we'll move on to the next piece. But you said so many good things. So so Jerry Lewis, so the culture piece there. Man, I cannot tell you. So I've worked for organizations that have spent obscene amounts of money trying to develop a culture that they, the culture they want to be associated with their organization and everything. But the organization I'm part of now, we don't spend money on our culture. Our firm doesn't, but the leaders in place make the culture, and it's night and day different. It's authentic. It's so much better when the people from the top down actually emulate the culture. They live the culture. They are the culture, and that trickles down, as opposed to, hey, we're gonna have all these events and all these speakers come in, and we're gonna give you free food and some, like, those are nice and that's great. Like, you're showing your employees you appreciate them, but at some point there's a manufactured source of culture versus the kind of organic source, and they just don't even compare, man. And I think working for good companies is one thing, but working for somebody who embodies that great culture, I mean, I'd run through a brick wall for the people I work for now and work with now.
That's right. Because leaders are on a stage all the time, right? And you've noticed that, Ryan. You've noticed that, and their actions speak way more, louder than words. You're on a stage. Every interaction, every word that you speak is under a microscope at all times. And it's, I say culture's like marriage, right? If you have to remind your wife that you love her every day, then you're not really showing the love.
100%.
If you have to remind your employees about your culture every day, you don't have a culture.
That is it. That is so good. That's exactly it. Because if you tell your wife, like, hey honey, I love you, but you're going out and doing stuff, and it's like, well, you're showing me you don't love me. Yeah. But even though you're telling me you do, and that's so good. That's so good. Yeah, you have to walk the walk.
Yes. Really. And that's another thing that Jerry, J. Lou, I call him, he said, is when I went into leadership, he said, remember, you are on a stage every moment of every day.
Yeah.
Every single thing that you do will be under a microscope. And if here's another thing about culture, right? I was talking with Greenlee about this, because one of our friends had gotten, laid off after a very long time at a place. And, there's a big difference between we are family and we are like family, right? If you are prepared to say we're family, think about this. You work 17 years for a place, okay? And then they're like, well, there's just not a place for here. You're really great. You're a great culture fit, but there's just not a place for this. Could you imagine, you have sons or daughters, or one of each, is that right?
2 daughters.
Okay, $2. Could you ever imagine a day in your family sitting down with your daughter and saying, you're a great fit, we love you so much, but there's just not a place in this family for you anymore?
Oh gosh, no.
No. So here's the thing. I'm okay if you say we are family. I'm cool with that. I'm cool if you say we are like family. Like family is, hey, we have to make some tough cuts, got to let you go, it's still business. We are family is telling your daughter that she's no longer part of the family because you're just not we just can't afford it, or there's not a place for you anymore, right? One word, all the difference. Like, it's okay. It's okay as an organization to say you're here to make money, right? I think that we've swung, because people look back at Carnegie and Rockefeller and Chase, or JP Morgan and all these people like they're some heroic, awesome people. They were largely assholes. Like Carnegie, actually thought that 1 out of 11 people dying in his plants was an acceptable risk of doing business, right? That's not a family. But I'm okay with that mentality because Carnegie never said you're part of the, U.S. Steel family. Right. He said, you're here to make money. I'm here to make money. That's cool. That's the deal we're making. That's fine. Rockefeller, same thing. Vanderbilt, same thing, right? They weren't saying you're part of the family. They're saying we're here to make a ton of money. Come with me. I'll pay you really well in terrible working conditions, but that's also, it's another subject for another day. That's fine. Just be upfront with who you are.
Yes.
Don't BS me that we are family.
Right.
And then after 15 years, there's, hey, hey, Ryan, it's been nice having you part of the family, but go find a new family. That's not family activity.
Nope. And I think, yeah. And that culture piece oh man, that hits hard. Everything that you just said, it's like, there's some organizations where that's truer than I'd like to admit, which is unfortunate, but,
exactly. And you don't realize it till you get outside, right?
Yeah. 100%.
You get outside, and that's why I always say you put the cult in culture, right? Because cult-like behavior, like and I like when there's people that I worked with for 13 years, and I'd show up and I'd see him, I'd be like, hey, what's going on? And it's kind of like, oh gosh, should I be talking to Kyle? Yeah. He's not one of us anymore. Should I talk to him?
Yeah.
Right. It's like, when do we stop just being human beings and friends? Right now, there's a lot of people I see and they're like, what's up? Hey, how's it going? All that stuff. But you probably experienced it too, where you see some old coworkers and you're like, what's up? And they act like, oh my God, I think he has the plague. Like, I don't know if we should get within 6 feet. Right.
But yeah, it's almost like I coughed in the grocery store in the middle of the COVID pandemic. Everybody's like, whoa,
That's right. Stay away.
Yeah.
Stay away.
Oh man. And then the other thing too, so with Chad, I think it's so important and underutilized, the importance of accountability people in your life, whether it's through your church, whether it's in your family, whether it's through work or just friends. Because I think that having that accountability, that sense of responsibility to somebody that you respect and care about, it rises, a rising tide raises all boats. That's what that does. So important. So important. I feel like in most situations, I think everybody should have somebody that they're being mentored by, and then somebody that they're also mentoring. It doesn't always need to be that. I mean, obviously we go through different stages of life, but I think that's a really healthy way to go through life.
The number of text messages back to Chad that say GFY, and you can decode that, you're an a-hole, probably at least once a month, right? But he knows that I need to hear it, and I know that he's right. And, we'll leave it at that. And then the next day it's like, cool, here's the plan. This is what I'm doing, right? Yeah. But you need that. And you also need to understand who you are as a person. I'm not that person for a lot of people. I am very terrible at saying, you need to do this, you need to wake up. I'm going to coach you up. I'm going to make you feel good. I'm going to fill your bucket, right? Chad is not that person. I mean, he'll make you feel good, right, when you're doing, great things, but you need to realize your own limitations. Like, I'm just not that person. I'm not that direct, right? I'm uncomfortable with that directness. I've gotten better at it, but I'll never be great at it. And so kind of understanding that helps out as well.
Yeah. Oh, definitely. Awesome, man. This is great. Well, I feel like the time has flown by. I still want to get to this last piece though. So
let's go.
Legacy. So in 20 years, what do you want people saying about Kyle? What do you want, if somebody came on the show, what do you want them to say? I mean, it's kind of interesting because somebody was already on the show and said something about you. So hopefully you liked what Seth said. But
I love it.
But what do you want your legacy to be, Kyle?
It's easy. That I always left people feeling better about themselves than when I found them, right? And that's something that I subscribe to every single day. Just genuine, authentic, great guy that helped. I'll give you some examples. Like something that if I'm having a bad day, you can only control those 6 inches between your head, right? Or between your ears. That's all you can do in life. Like everything else is just noise, and it's your choice to listen to it or not. We can all scroll past posts that piss you off. Some stop and engage. I don't do that. If I'm having a bad day and Ryan over the last 10 months, you probably have more bad days up here than in any other time in history, right?
Yeah.
And my outlook on it is very simple. I can't do anything about how I'm feeling, but I can do something about how somebody else is feeling, right? So I'll give you an example. I have probably given out, I don't know, $500 in lotto tickets over the past 10 months, right? Like just being at a grocery store, I'll get, I'll be like, hey, can I get a dollar scratcher, right? So I'll grab $1, and then when I'm done, here you go, have a great day, to the lady that's working. Or there's a guy behind me in the gas station. Hey, here's a lotto ticket, have a great day, right? And now I never watch them scratch it, because I'm left with the thought that of them maybe scratching and winning $5,000. And now I've just made a memory for them for a lifetime, right? Like, and that's they ever see me on TV, they ever see anything, they're gonna be like, I remember that. That's the dude that handed me $1 and I won $100, right? Like, I remember that guy. So you can't do anything but just fill in, Jerry Lewis talks about, the idea of the bucket, filling up a bucket, right? And be a bucket filler, don't be a bucket drainer. And that's what I am. Like, I'm going to fill up your bucket. I'm going to make you feel better than when I found you. And that's it. That I was just a genuine, nice guy who helped fill up your bucket. Now, there's a lot of, inauthentic people in the age of, I tell my sons, I'm like, stop looking at these, all these Instagram influencers. They're just fake ass people who, the minute they put their camera down, they treat everybody like crap, like there's something big. In being from the Midwest, born and raised, Ryan, like, you watched your grandparents, your parents, your aunts, your uncles treat people. Yeah, now we have our good amount of, smack talking back and forth about sports teams and everything else. And, if you, the IQs of states and stuff like that. But at the end of the day, you saw how your family treated people. And in the Midwest, we don't care who you are, what you do, where you came from. I mean, you've been at bars where you've drank, Busch Light or probably Spotted Cow, and that person walks out there in overalls, just, covered in oil and everything else. And they walk out of the bar and the bartender says, that guy's sitting on a pile, right? Like, he runs a machine shop and he's sitting on, $10 million, right? Because he was just a hard worker. And he didn't come in flashing his money and all this other stuff. He just came in to have a beer and hang out with everybody, because that's who we are. We're just genuine, good people who generally want the world to be a better place through one interaction at a time. You can't, everybody wants to change the world with a bunch of stuff. Just start with a lotto ticket. Just hand it, right? Next time you're at the grocery store, you're probably going to think of that gas station, because these guys, they're making, what, $10 an hour working at a gas station during the pandemic, probably don't have health insurance through their company. And they're the ones that are out there. We think about healthcare workers, think about the people at the grocery store, at the Casey's, general store, right? Like, buy them a lotto ticket, make their day. And now you've just made a memory, right? That's all you can do. So
I love it. And I think so many times we overcomplicate what we can do for somebody. Like, we underestimate the power of something simple like that.
Yes.
Like, how much effort does it take to do that? Not a whole lot, but you had to think about it and actually do it.
Yeah.
And you're probably the only person that, certainly that day, probably that week, probably that month, probably the whole year, maybe their entire life, that's ever done that for them.
Yeah.
And that sticks. It leaves them feeling better than where you found them. I think that's so cool, because a lot of times it's like, well, what could I do? What could little old me do for somebody?
Yeah.
It's just something small. Just do something. It's just like starting a podcast. Just do it. Just be nice to somebody. Show them that you care. Hold the door.
Take action. There's a video that Jerry Lewis had us watch, right? And it's, I show it to everybody. It's called Johnny the Bagger, right? And it's about true story. I think it's Barb Glantz or something like that, motivational speaker. She came to talk to this large grocery chain, and in the audience was a gentleman with Down syndrome. And he thought, and she said, make somebody's day, create lasting memories. And he thought about it, Johnny did. Well, what can I do? I'm just a bagger at a grocery store, right? And he went home and he told his dad, he's like, hey, I want to print out Johnny's thought for the day, right? And putting in the bag of everybody's groceries, you know, just something nice, you know,
Yeah.
very simple,
Yeah.
you know, like, you know, treat others the way you want to be treated, you know, just something like that. So he prints off like, you know, 100 labels and has them and puts that in the bag and says, have a nice day. Well, 2 weeks later, the, the owner of the store shows up, and Johnny's line's like all the way back to the freezer section, like 50 deep. And he's like, we got to get more lines open. Each customer said, no, we're here because we want Johnny's thought for the day. Like,
Oh,
you know, and people that hadn't stopped, you know, ever, or, you know, had only stopped once a week, came every day just to grab something, right? And so there's all these people lined up just to get Johnny's thought for the day.
I love it.
And it wasn't, you know, it's not like some groundbreaking thing. It's just that he took the time to let somebody else know you're acknowledged in this world. I thought about you enough to give you this, right? And if you boil life down to one simple thing, my man, it's acknowledgement, right? And when I hand a lotto ticket to somebody, they're going to go home. Their wife might talk to them about this terrible post on Facebook about Biden, about Trump, about Hillary, about the Russians, the Chinese, you know, all this stuff. But then they're going to have this narrative. Well, I know there's one decent human being left in this world. The dude gave me a lotto ticket.
Yeah,
so
right.
I've just changed the narrative for
it.
that whole entire, you know, rest of their week or year. It's like, you know, you can say, oh, society, but we're all members of society. And when a member of society fills up your bucket, right, like Johnny the Bagger, then you're like, okay, I think this world's going to be okay. And in this time of, you know, not being able to be human, right, not being able to hug or, you know, touch or show any affection or whatever, that's more important than ever. And that's, I started doing it in March, and I've, you know, I did it sparingly in the past, but, you know, yeah, since March, probably $500, man. And you'll probably think about that next time that you're at the gas station, right?
I love it, man. I love that so much. Oh, that's so good. I think the power of doing something small but thoughtful for people. I think, especially this time of year, it's always something that we can be focusing more on for sure. So
Absolutely, absolutely, man. Well,
thanks for
thank
coming.
you.
Yeah, thanks for coming on, man. So before we leave, what's the best way that people can connect with you? I know hashtag 1 Minute Wednesday.
Yep, hashtag 1 Minute Wednesday. You know, on LinkedIn is the best way. I'm very active on LinkedIn, as you know. I thought you were going to try to sell me insurance based on your message, but it turned out very awesome. But you know what I'm saying? Like, there's so many people. It's like connect and then pitch, right? And yeah, but definitely on LinkedIn, I absolutely love. I love LinkedIn, right? It's just pure, and I think in a couple years, us marketers will ruin it. You know, just because there's a lot of spam going out now, but it's just a great place to create content in a safe environment to do it as well. There's you know, but definitely LinkedIn, Facebook. You know, Kyle Steele, E on the end. Look me up, connect. I love connecting with people, and on LinkedIn especially, I keep that tribe really, you know, really tight. You know, I've grown it the right way. I always say anybody in my LinkedIn network I can sell to, they can sell to me, or I can connect you to somebody that can help, right? And so just having that mentality has helped me grow really, you know, I think it's around 4,000 now, but it's 4,000 people that I know 90% on a somewhat personal level as well.
That's
So
awesome.
that's how I love it. And, you know, get me great guys, you know, like you that are just genuine and want to connect and see how we can help, right? The age of the one call sale is totally over. It just is. And there'll probably be somebody that I refer to you in 5 months, right? It's not going to take 5 days or 5 hours, right? It's like 5 months, top of mind, one to scratch it. So yeah, definitely LinkedIn, my man.
I love it. I love it, man. Well, I will say, just from our couple conversations that we've had, you've definitely made an impact on my life. You've made my life better than it was before we got connected. So thank you to Seth. Thank you to you for doing that. And thanks for being on the show.
My man, I appreciate you. Likewise. And now we're friends for life, man. That's the burden of meeting me.
Even though you're a Michigan fan, we'll get over that.
I know. Go Blue.
All right. See ya.